Hi, this is Jennifer from Positively Learning, and today I'm going to be sharing how I supplemented the CKLA Skills curriculum for. So, I was a special educator, splitting my time between the inclusion classroom setting for first grade and the resource room, polling groups. So, I was polling groups several times throughout the day for reading, and this is a guided reading group. This was a focused group for students with IEP goals in early literacy, and it was a group of students that were performing in the bottom percentile according to CKLA skills. They have a diagnostic at the beginning. So, what I needed to do was to supplement many of the skills that were in the curriculum. Even the remediation guide were paced a lot too fast for my students, and they needed more multisensory activities. And so I created these as small group activities and as centers. So if my students, I had many overlapping students, meaning they would come to me for several different reading intervention groups throughout the day, some of the same students. So I needed quite a bit of hands on materials that they could use. Now, this is a supplement to the skills curriculum and not a replacement. The curriculum is solid, it is terrific, but what I just needed to do was have my students gain more access to it. So I had to kind of fill in some prerequisites, provide more parallel activities for them to do, and then I also used the general education curriculum. So it was a lot. But I'm happy to say that it really was successful and my students did well with it. And I have a lot of positive feelings about CKLA, and hopefully you will too. Now, what I did though is I taught it for several years and I kept on adding more and more because, as we know, our students are different every year and they have different needs. That certainly was the case in the resource room. So this bundle just grew and grew. It's over 1,000 pages, and I've created a guide that you can access. It's a free preview guide, and I want to walk through it today. But I will also leave the link so you can download it, whether you want to just take a closer look at certain parts, print it out, whatever makes it easy for you. But it's always easier to share and not just be on your own. So when you purchase the bundle, you would get something that looks like this. See, here's a lot. There's a whole lot in there. And so it's mostly in the form of PDFs, a couple of PowerPoints, and some zip files. This is more than enough to supplement the entire school year. It is organized. Some things are organized by unit. So you could just open up the unit and have the majority of the materials there. Then the spelling units and the tricky words, which are CKLA's sight words, those are separated, and it's just a lot, which is great. You know, you're going to have everything you need. However, it's a lot to organize. So I created this guide, and I'm going to open it up and walk through it right now. But I wanted to mention, I'll link it below, but it's this green where it says view preview. If you open that up, the guide will be right there for you. And you'll also see a link to it's a little slow, a link to this video. So it's a 36-page guide, and I just wanted to talk it through. I'm not going to read it to you, but just to kind of show you where it's all organized. So this is the preview guide. I'm going to diminish it a little bit so we can look at it. Okay, so there is a lot there, even if you used half of the activities one year, half of the activities the next year, you're going to have more than enough. One thing I want to mention is at the end of this 36-page preview are checklists, and it's a checklist of each unit's activities, and it's telling you, also giving information on how to print and organize it, and then you can check it off as you prep it. So it is a lot of prep, but I think all curriculums that we're using in the schools, you're going to have a lot of prep, especially for our younger grades. All right. It starts off, I tried to go in order between Unit 1 through 7, although there was a lot of overlapping, and you know what your students need. Everyone might be moving on to Unit 2 or 3, and you have students who are still needing skills on Unit 1. So you have to kind of take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. But you'll see that there's a lot more hands-on activities than what was provided in the curriculum. I did almost all of the materials in black and white whenever I could so that you could print it on either color cardstock to change different colors to color code by level, by student, by groups, or just make it fun and colorful. And that is up to you. All right, so at the beginning unit, there are some beginning sound cards, and it's for all of the consonants. And something that, CKLA first grade like assumes you have all of this. And as we know as teachers, we can't make that kind of assumption, especially at the beginning of the first grade year. There are also syllable header cards. So these exact same cards you've already taken the time to prep for initial sounds, they're also specifically chosen to be used for syllable header cards. That's something I also tried to do. I don't think that everything needs to be a separate activity here and a separate activity there. Like if we can prep once and use it in multiple ways, let's do it. Definitely. So when I chose the initial sound cards, I did keep in mind the different sorting syllable activities we could do with the exact same cards. So that cheat sheet list is in there for you, as well as headers to use with your small groups, or you can put that into a center. Here's a short vowel sort, more picture sorts, that's phonemic awareness. Then we move into more of a phonics. So the phonics has the decodable words, and those are divided by each unit. So you could print like unit 1 in yellow, unit 2 in blue. Now, again, like you could be all the way up to unit 4, and you could have students in different levels, right? You could have some in unit 1, some in unit 2, some in unit 3, and so on. So that's where printing these black and white pictures on different colors can really help you stay organized. So this is going to be a multi-activity unit. This is kind of the bread and butter of each unit. You can use it just for decoding words. You can use it for sorting words because there's different phonics sound spellings in each unit. You could sort by the spelling. You can match them with the picture, or you can forget about these text cards and just use the picture cards. So you can use them many different ways. The next set are the phrase cards. Now, the phrases come directly from the decodable readers because my students just needed more time. I mean, they needed much more time on these readers, and they loved them. They just weren't as accessible as I think CKLA thought they would be. So we had created these phrase cards. They are specifically designed to be hole punched and put onto a book ring. I'll show you a picture of those in a little bit. They are also all organized by unit. So this one says unit 3. And so that way you could color code them as well if you want, by different units, or just keep them separated, but I have them available for all 7 units. These are flipping phonics cards. These are amazing. They're flipping because I don't know if you can tell in the picture, I have them hole punched, so I put them on a book ring. Everything goes on a book ring. But these are for the phonics sound spellings, and they are reference like cheat sheets, not for us, but for our students. So you can see like there's a sound spelling, there's 6 pictures. There's a different sound spelling, there's 6 pictures. And the 6 pictures have the text with like filled in font or letters that show the phonics sound spelling. So these would be perfect to do as quick warm-ups or quick cool downs at the end of your small group, or you could put these in your centers so students can like reference them. They could even be put in like a writing center so students can practice writing with them. I love those. I love anything that helps our students be more independent. Every unit also has a shared reading, although these are very small, they are sentence strip size. So they're full size for sentence strips. I actually like to print them using that multiple setting on my printer, and I'll print really small ones and turn them into a center. And I did put them on cards right here. So it's kind of a teacher reference card, but those are available for all the units. When we do shared reading in the resource room, often it's, yes, we're reading it, of course, and it's a shared experience. So I'm modeling students. It's like a I do, we do, you do. I also like to play like I spy so that we'll go on a hunt. Like we'll look for words with the silent E, or we'll look for words that start with H, or the sound. We'll do different things like that as well. And so that's really good advice for your non-readers. Students who are, this is just a little bit beyond right now. We don't want them to miss out on the experience of the text, but they might access it a little bit differently. Here's sound spelling visuals. Now, these are in full color. It comes with a list of all the different units and the sound spellings that appear and where they appear in each unit. There's 31 sound spellings. And then I put in 6 extras to kind of round it out, because we know that our students might see words that have other phonic sound spellings. But these are very funny. You can't get the whole picture from here, but I put like no chocolate for the chick, quadruplets, quiet. And it's just kind of funny stuff. They're color coded with the phonic sound spelling. They've got the picture for students to remember. You can print these out full page size to like display as you're focusing on the skill. I also like to print things smaller. I do that quite a bit so that I could keep a set at the small group table for my students to reference. So those are like kind of tongue in cheek, which I think helps make it learning stick, better retention. The next part are wiggle cards and wiggle word slides. Wiggle words are amazing. I put in some kindergarten ones because my students, I want them to be as independent as possible. So instead of doing this at a instructional level, first grade, I'm using these at a independent level so my students can read them and read them by themselves. And we can always make them harder. I have all of the units available, so you can always keep progressing when your students are ready. What these are there's some kind of phrase with a verb, and they're decodable. So whatever phonics skill. So like if you're doing um, the long E spelling, like in the word be, well, that appears in unit 2. So what students do is they're going to be reading the phrase to themselves, and then as soon as they know it, they can start acting it out. And so of course you're going to have a room of students buzzing like a bee, but that way you're also seeing how they're decoding and how they're comprehending what they've read. And then I also have 300 words or phrases, and these are differentiated by the different levels. Those are super fun. It's a great way to get a brain break and just get some extra movement and also check for understanding. The next set are wordplay cards, just like little extra engagement cards. They're cards to practice. Like when we're doing decoding every day, we're warming up our sight words or tricky words every day. Just sometimes you need to add a little bit of energy, and that's what these cards are all about. So I keep them at the small group table. We might pick one, like a student might get to choose one for the day, and that's the one we use all day. The next day, we might choose a different one. One thing that I think is really important is repurposing these activities. It's good for us as the teacher and how we're making use of our time, but it's also really good for students. And so I made a cheat sheet of all the activities included in the bundle and how you can turn them into a center. And I added center signs. So the center signs are student friendly. They have the text, but they also have the picture supporting the text. And that way your students can continue working on a skill. So if you are on Unit 4, instructional level, well, then your students might be seeing Unit 3 materials in centers because that's their independent level. And you can prep them all at once and then set them out. You can color code them, like all Unit 1 is yellow and all Unit 2 is blue. That way you can easily stay organized and all students can get what they need. The next set of activities is really good. Now, I will say this was more for grade level, which is first grade in this case. This was a little bit tricky for my students to be doing independently, although we could have done it at small groups. And this was a request from a general ed teacher that I worked with, who was amazing. What they are is there's a set of printable pages for every one of the readers, the different decodable books from the 7 units. And it's an I Spy. So this is a independent reading activity. Students are reading the decodable books on their own during independent reading. So this could be like a activity during guided reading. And you are sending them on a hunt for phonics sound spellings. There are pages, and up at the top, I know it's teeny tiny print here, but it aligns with a story. So if a student is reading that story, this is the page they do. They are on a hunt for these words with these different sound spellings or ELA concepts that we have learned in the unit, and then they can use the words in a sentence. There are also blank templates so that you could use these with any book, not just the decodable books, and there are answer keys as well. So if you printed out all 7 units, you would have independent reading work for the entire school year ready for you. The next set is tracing pages. There's 100 pages. They go in a order. They follow the phonics scope and sequence by unit. So you're going to see a bunch for unit 1, a bunch for unit 2, and then it does start to trickle down as you move towards unit 7. And they are words that use the phonics sound spelling in that unit, and then they use them with a sentence using tricky words to make up the rest of the sentence. So I have to say the sentences are pretty simple. Do you like bats? I see a cat, and where is the bus? Things like that. Those were not real examples, but things like that, because I wanted my students to be independent. I created these for the resource room because I have students who just missed qualifying for OT. And although OT, in my opinion, was impacting their classroom work. So they thought these were fun. This is like, a brain break for them. Like this is practically like a recess activity because they think this is fun to trace and color and read. But of course, we know that they're getting a lot of great development from this as well. So there's 100 pages. You printed them all, put them in a sheet protector, or put them in a center with like golf pencils for students to use to improve their fine motor development and just give them extra practice time. Those are awesome. These flip over cards are for Unit 2. They are in the Unit 2 packet, and they are all CVC words that also make sense when you add the silent E, like tap, tape, man, main, and so on. Those are really great practice. We'll do a few in the small groups where we read the CVC word, then we flip out the card with the E, then we reread, and we listen to the different vowel sounds. And then I will move the rest of them into a center where my students can act like the teacher. That's a really good partner activity as well. The next is a fidget spinner pages. There are 3 pages. This is included in the bundle, but it's free in my store as well. So you can just go ahead and grab this. It's 3 different pages, and each page has a spinner. And the spinner is for CVC, CVCE, which is the silent E spelling, and tricky words. And students would put a fidget spinner, it's sized perfectly for a fidget spinner. They'd put it on top of that little spinner circle graphic, and they'd spin it, and wherever it stops, they would have to go find the word on the activity page. And so this would be ideal if you had 3 students working together and they have 3 different color crayons, like purple, green, and blue. And so students would go find their word, say it's a CVC word, and they find the word log. They would go and color that word in. And of course, by the end of this activity, everyone's had a chance to do the fidget spinner. Everyone's had a chance to find and read their words. And then everyone's had a chance to color, and the page is going to look very colorful. Awesome activity. That was a huge hit. The next one is parts of speech. So parts of speech is covered in CKLA, which is awesome. But they covered it, it was just like a little bit too hard the way they covered it, because they covered it with decodable sentences. And so if your students are not necessarily reading at that level for decodable, say there are just a couple units before that, which is totally fine. But if they're not decoding the sentence, then the parts of speech lesson is kind of not as effective as we want it to be. So what I did is I went to the first unit, which has the book snapshots, and I pulled out nouns, verbs, and adjectives from that book because that's where we spent a lot of time at the beginning of the year. And I did a sorting activity. So there are so many cards available in that packet. You don't need to print them all. If you just want to print like half of them, you'd have enough. But if your students need more, that's okay too. What I also liked about these cards is you could use them for other things. They could be just decodable cards without the parts of speech sorting. So you could reuse those easily. The next is the plural nouns sort. There's a sorting for small groups, or you could do it as centers. You could even do it as like take to your table independent work. That is included in Unit 5. And then the verb phrases in Unit 3, there's text and there's pictures for students to read and match. And then there's verb tense. And so there's a visual that you can use in your small group or hanging on like a bulletin board. And then there's text cards. You can match them to the picture, but then you could also sort them. So you could sort just the pictures, you could sort just the text by future, present, past, or you could do both. Days of the week appear as tricky words in one of the units, which is awesome. Like I love having functional words. However, pretty tricky for students I was working with. So I added a extra activity in here. You could either laminate this days of the week and make it a center that students practice over and over again, or you could do it just as the picture shows, as a cut and paste. I did both. Adjectives, you've got text cards, you've got picture cards to match with them, or you could be just using the text cards, like an example, a wise owl, and then asking students to identify the adjective and what is the adjective describing. Wise is describing the owl. And then the picture could just be an extra. Okay, so this looks very simple, these 3 pictures, and I definitely need to provide a little bit more information. So again, I think the theme is my students were not exactly ready for CKLA and the pacing that it used. Even the remediation guide that comes with the curriculum, which is wonderful, super activities, it still wasn't enough. So I didn't want to recreate the remediation guide and I didn't want to recreate the curriculum. I wanted to supplement it. So that's what I did. I created 60 days of intervention. And this is for students that really were needing extra time, but then it also provided you opportunity to collect some data, some progress monitoring to see how they're doing. So what it is it's just a very simple small group lesson. So I would say like maybe 5 to 10 minutes, depending on your students. And you would have 5 words a day, you'd have a bonus word, you'd have a sentence. So students are reading these, they're writing them, whether dry erase boards or there's this little purple page can go paper copy if you wanted to collect a work sample, or it could be inserted into a sheet protector so you could reuse them every day. But you're focusing in on just 5 words. It's actually 6 because of the bonus, and 1 sentence. So you are doing that every day. And then the next day you're doing a different word. And if you look at all of the pages together, you can see how they progress. There's 60 days in there. And so I found that to be very, very effective. It's very direct instruction like, and it's very systematic, which is what my students needed. So that is in there. It's really good. Just also, I mentioned as a data collection, especially if like you just need a little more information on how students are doing and how they're retaining it. Because I think we've all worked with students who like, oh, they've got it. This is great. And then the next day you're like, wait a minute, what just happened here? This is really helpful to kind of see those trends and see how it's moving. Our students probably are progressing, but sometimes it's hard to see. This systematic approach makes it a little bit more data friendly. Okay, the next is more picture cards for sorting, long vowels, short vowels. Of course, like the theme is repurposing. You could use these cards for so many other things. You could use them for dictation. You could use them to match. You could use them to identify ending sounds, beginning sounds, as well as the vowel sounds. Inside Unit 4, we go through contractions, and I mean, we do them in the curriculum, and I use the curriculum materials first, always. but I was just finding it just was not enough. My students needed much, much more. You could use these as worksheets. You could, I mean, I'm really big on laminating them and using them again and again. Like that pink sheet right there, it's a sorting between contraction and not a contraction. So if you would laminate it, cut those bottom parts off and cut them up, students can practice it over and over again as they move into centers. Good early finishers activity as well. Question or statement sorting. You could use them, of course, exactly as is for sorting. That would be a center or small group activity, but also these are decodable sentences using skills from the units. So whenever, like if I see unit 5, then I am using as many of the phonics skills from unit 5, but I'm also drawing from units 1 through 4. So I'm not using unit 6 or 7 so that my students still can find this as accessible as possible. I'm still going. We are on page 15 of this 36-page guide. That's how much is included in here. I am telling you, you will be set for the year. All right, there's pronouns that match the pronouns that CKLA gives us. The only thing I did a little differently was just make it in more of a matching set with visuals. And noun sort, very similar, just adding more visuals, adding more opportunities for hands-on sorting and practice. These are all in the curriculum, but my students just needed more. Inflectional endings, exact same thing. There are tons of cards with the root word, and then these can go in sheet protectors to reuse, or you could have them, like one's open-ended that I would use with the cards. This one that doesn't have the name on the top, this is what I would insert into like a plastic sheet protector or dry erase sleeve to reuse in centers. The one with the name is something you could do as a small group activity with your students or independent activity that you could collect for a work sample. Phonics clipit cards, these are for Unit 1. Unit 1 is got like heavy dose of activities because Unit 1 in the CKLA curriculum is pretty much a recap of everything they learned in kindergarten, and that's where my students arrived needing that remedial work. So we did spend a lot of time in there and they did make a lot of gains. A clothespin activity is always a favorite. I use those plastic photo storage boxes that are 4 by 6 inches. I would add maybe five to 10 of these cards with a couple of clothespins, those mini clothespins, and then put that in there. That was always a student favorite. Oh, one quick idea. You could put like a little star sticker behind the correct word, like behind the word fan, so students could always flip over the card. You could also just use a Sharpie marker if you're laminating these. Fact and opinion sort from Unit 5. And now we're starting to move into the tricky words. This is an engagement activity. These are called breath boxes, where it's how many words students can read in one breath. Of course, we're not encouraging like any craziness here, but it's just more of an engagement activity. I did use the sticky word tracking. You can use these for any sight words. It's editable when you open up the file in the bundle. I did put a picture of underneath in the resource room how I hung them up. I wanted them to be available to my students so that they can always just grab them and take them to their center or to their table. And then I showed how we checked in. I tried to do it like maybe like either 2 students, 3 students a day, or I would make like Friday fun day where, I got to check a bunch of them in a row, but we would put a sticker after my students were like demonstrating mastery. And of course, mastery is going to be determined what you think, like whether they keep that word for a couple of weeks and continue to be able to read it, or if they read it right away, that's up to you. I did put some extra tricky word card sets. These are more individual size. And when you open up the file, you'll see that I think there's 10 to a page, which makes it really good individual student size. And if you want to send them home, if a family requests, I have the exact same words in a traceable font. If you want to laminate them, give students extra practice writing. I also have just a cheat sheet for you. That's an exclamation point. I gotta switch that. But that is all of the units and they're color coded. So you can see that the tricky words are very front loaded, in unit 1, and then they really taper down. By Unit 6, there are none in Unit 7, and that's totally fine because we're still working on getting those and making sure that they are retained. Around the World and Red Light, Green Light, those are both literacy movement games. They have the tricky words from CKLA. They also have the alphabet in uppercase, lowercase, and some phonics decodable words. So those are both games. The game directions are in there, lots of fun. We played them often as warm-ups or as transitions. My students would often come for their reading intervention groups in the resource room, and we would have to transition back to the general education classroom. So often, like when we lined ourselves up to get ready to exit the room, we would play a couple of these games. And then there are spelling activities. So spelling starts at Unit 3. And many of the Unit 3 spelling activities I do as a group activity. And then Units 4, 5, 6, and 7 are like more traditional spelling activities. Not going to share my thoughts on spelling lists in first grade. I have a lot of thoughts on it, but we just made the best of it, and we did our very best. So I provide lots of support materials to get through it. There are full page lists. There's half page lists in here. There's even smaller lists, these little pencil ones for individual students. I have some editable activities where students can put in the words and make it a color by code. That was a super popular center activity that we did every week. I also put in 25 different spelling tests. And, I hope there's no judgment here, but like they have spelling tests in the workbooks. And when you see first graders tear those pages out, it's a lot. You're just thinking, there's got to be a better way. So I did make 25 of these templates. I wasn't even good about this. I would just like mass copy these variety so that students just grabbed one. So every student might have a different one. That might be a little disorganized for you, but that's how we rolled in the resource room. And then I had some tricky word sorts in here, not just the tricky words, but also words from the decodable books. And those are half page sorts. You can laminate them, use them as a center. You can have students just use them on a piece of paper. You can collect them as a work sample, or you can do them here, like I did with the construction paper and cut and paste. There's a chaining activity. So now chaining is a big part of CKLA. I find it to be extremely effective for my students. It is a phonemic awareness activity. And so I noticed that at the beginning of the school year, that was like a little tricky for my students. And so I did add some visual support in the form of pictures. So it's still phonemic awareness, but I also did it in the form of a text. So it was a phonics activity, but I really just wanted my students to notice the visual changes from word to word. So I don't know if it's easy to see with the font, but you see some empty letters and some filled in letters. The empty letters indicate where the change occurred as we change one word to the next. So students can notice that relationship. My students loved this. So, of course, when my students love something, I do more of it. I turned it into a hands-on center. But this activity has 3 different centers in there. One is exactly as shown, where it's picture to picture, text to text, or of course you could do picture to text. There's extra cards in there for the second center, and then there's also materials to make a classroom book of chaining words. So I based this on Unit 1, which is CBC words. But what I really wanted to do was get my students used to the chaining process, like understanding how it worked. And then we didn't need as much visual support. They still wanted to do it because they still loved it. And my students always can use more practice. However, as we moved through the curriculum with the new words to chain, we didn't have the visuals as we progressed because they had the process down. And then the next part is a cheat sheet. So at the end of first grade, you have a diagnostic. It might be at the beginning of second grade as well. And so it's a diagnostic on how students are doing, and it's great. I needed a little bit more data because I wanted more different data points rather than kind of like leaving it to the end because my students, like, we have some issues that, areas that we're working on. So I created a additional diagnostic that just gave me a little bit more information, more data. But then what I also created was a cheat sheet. So the cheat sheet on the left-hand side is like what that phonics sound spelling focus is. And then I made a cheat sheet of where you can find support materials in the CKLA curriculum. And so, specifically, the remediation guide. If you are a special educator, you will be using those guides. But also, if you're a special educator but you're supporting gen ed, this could be really helpful to provide for them so that they can help their students too, that you could be able to provide that support. Okay, moving ahead, there's some tricky word PowerPoint slides. There's 2 slides for each of the tricky words. One is just the text word for students, for you to display, students read it, identify the tricky word, and then you see it in a sentence with a visual to confirm its meaning. So seeing those tricky words in context. And then I did make extra printables for Unit 1, a whole set of CBC words, a whole set of CBCE, words with blends, and then words with digraphs, because my students just needed more. So there are 15 pages there. At the end of this unit guide, there are printable checklists. So you can see on the left-hand column is a list of the activities, and these are all included in the supplemental bundle. And then there's a printing suggestion. And then there's a checklist so you can keep yourself organized. Like, yes, I have prepped this, or you make a note like this is what I'm going to do next week, or what next month or next year. So there's that, and there's a page for each unit, because again, there's over 1,000 pages of resources. But this is also really good for a preview if you want just to get a closer look. We just talked it through, and the guide will show you pictures, but you might just want to print out these checklists to make sure. Here's Unit 7, and then I have a checklist for the tricky words and a checklist for the spelling. And then I did put a binder cover to help you keep it all together, and some more pictures. Oh, I wanted to show you those phrasing cards I mentioned earlier. My students just love these. I use them where I'm the person holding them and we're working on them together, warming up our words at the carpet or at the small group table. But as we move to new units, I would put older units in centers, and my students would just grab them and read them, which is awesome. And some more pictures. All right. Well, I hope that made it a little bit easier. There's just no way to share 1,000 pages and make it like, oh, I've got it, in one swoop. It's just a lot of information, but I do hope it was made it a little more helpful. And if you have any questions, be sure to let me know. I'm going to link this bundle below, and so that you can come to this page and grab the preview. Please follow me if you are interested in any more word work activities, specific resources for special education settings, and a resource room. It's there for you. All right, thank you so much.